This is enraging. I'm not thoroughly familiar, but I'm probably more familiar with specific problems in Canada's Indigenous community than most people. You had Indigenous representatives, Native Americans, Canadian First Nations, come out and say, you can't separate from Canada, people, because we've got treaty rights on native lands, and you can't secede if you don't have our permission. So Danielle Smith, we formally tell you, even though we're not even acting formally on behalf of all First Nations or this particular First Nations, this is a letter coming from Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation. And it says, Dear Premier Smith, cease and desist separation threats. This is how you realize, by the way, this could have been written by anybody, so this is not a group-specific criticism. It's actually just, when people are idiots and they don't know how to draft legal letters, or they think you can just draft any legal letter and tell people to stop talking. Cease and desist separation threats. I mean, this is like Ally McBeal is representing the Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation, although I suspect they don't have adequate representation and they think this stupidity carries any weight. But let's read this. You are attempting to manufacture a national unity crisis by enabling a referendum on separatism and a fanatical cell of individuals at the exact moment when Canadians need to unite against Donald Trump's America. I'm not using the word Indian in any derogatory sense here, and I don't care if it's not the politically correct term. It's still in the Indian Act of Canada. These are Canada's First Nations, Native Americans, Indians, saying from the comfort of their corrupt towers reigning over their respective failed reservations, this is the moment Canadians need to unite against Donald Trump's America. Let that linger in your heads while I read the rest of this before I show you my response. The province of Alberta is on treaty lands. Please be advised that your irresponsible statements and actions are in breach of treaties number 6, 7, and 8. We demand that you immediately stand down from this conduct. Our treaties are sacred covenants and are to last forever. Alberta did not exist when our ancestors agreed to share the land with the Crown. The province has no authority to supersede or interfere with our treaties, even indirectly by passing the buck to a, quote, citizen, end quote, referendum. If you or any Canadians are not happy living on treaty lands, they are free to apply for citizenship elsewhere. Sincerely. I don't know if any letter like this floated around when Quebec had their referendum in 78 and 95. Canadians need to unite against Donald Trump's America. Do you know what I suspect? Some liberal activist wrote this for Chief Sheldon Sunshine, Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation, and Chief Billy Joe Tukaro, Mikisew Cree First Nation. We need to unite against Donald Trump's America. Before I get into it, does everybody know how many water boil advisories are still in effect in Canada as relates to First Nations land? As of November 7, 2024, there are 31 long-term drinking water advisories in effect across 29 First Nation communities in Canada. Now it's time we got to unite against Donald Trump's America. If you don't, I think everybody does know this, but if you don't, you're going to find it out right now. Do you know what the state of natives are in Canada in terms of lifespan, lifestyle, social issues? You probably can guess because I think it's roughly the same in America. It's just what happens when you're governed by corrupt tyrants who don't give you land rights, who don't respect the treaties that they've ever signed with your nations, who maybe arguably want to live a life that is incompatible with modern society. We need to unite against Donald Trump's America from the Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation. Holy hell, the brainwashing and propaganda is unreal. This is factually correct. You can go look it up yourselves. Canadian natives, First Nations, overrepresented in terms of homelessness, drug addiction and alcohol, murder, rape, incest. 26 First Nations don't have clean drinking water. Trump is not the cause of their collective social problems, but at least they've got the boogeyman to distract from their current social problems. A lot easier to hate Trump than solve their own complex social problems. It's so freaking pathetic. It enrages me. You go anywhere in Canada and if you go to the reserves, the disappeared women from the reserves is so terrible, they literally call it a genocide and they get it recognized as a genocide. Even though it's being perpetrated by and large by Native men, the argument is that white Europeans have beat down the Native population into a point where they commit disproportionate acts of violence, rape, kidnapping, and murder against their own, and it's white Europeans' fault. This is reality in Canada. No way to solve their own problems, but now they've got the biggest boogeyman on earth to blame all of their problems on. I was on with Richard Surrett the other day, and I posted the highlight yesterday, and I'll play it. Maybe people are going to think it's pompous to play my own words, but it's easier than just repeating them. They can't solve their own problems. It's sort of an element of Stockholm syndrome, Parkinson's law. They can't solve their own problems. They know they can't. They're in a state of deep despair. So the only thing they can find to do is blame it on something else and make that potential something else even worse than their own current living conditions.
What is the pathology to explain why Canadians, or at least those who voted Liberals, seem to embrace their own chains?
It is, I'm thoroughly convinced it's an iteration of Stockholm syndrome, and it's also an iteration of, sort of a concept of it's too complicated to fix the problem that they live in. They don't see any practical solution to their own misery, and so the only way they can rationalize it is by minimizing it against a boogeyman of an even greater misery, that being Donald Trump. Yeah, sure, we pay a lot of taxes. Sure, our healthcare system, they call it a right. Carney, healthcare is a right. Death care is a right in Canada. Healthcare doesn't exist. And so they say, well, it could be worse. At least, we're not going bankrupt to pay a doctor. No, you're just dying in the waiting rooms. You're just dying waiting for a doctor. So it could be worse in this eternal boogeyman in their mind. And the Liberals, to their credit, played that boogeyman of an evil that's even greater than their current suffering perfectly, to the point where they have now rationalized their current suffering because it could be worse because Trump, orange man bad. Trump is going to not only get what he wants, let me rephrase this. Trump is going to get what he wants because what he wants is what America needs. And the irony is what he wants is what America needs, is what Canada needs, but Canadians are too filled with their own irrational hate for Donald Trump to even understand it. Canadians need energy independence. Canadians need a clean earth to live in. And, one of Pierre Poilievre's good points that he didn't make anywhere near enough during the election campaign is that if Canadians and Canada produced their own energy, clean, ethical energy, and supplied it to India, and India had a commensurate reduction in their own production or burning of fossil fuels, Canada, what it would produce and sell to India, would reduce global emissions by more than what Canada produces in the first place. I'm no mathematician, but I can do basic math. You could eliminate all production, CO2 emissions from Canada, and it will be less effective than allowing Canada to exploit ethical, cleaner energy and ship it to India so that they don't have to dig it out of the earth and burn it in unethical ways. Canada operating at full tilt on energy production would reduce global emissions more than Canada shutting off the spigots entirely and going dark like North Korea. So what Canada needs? Energy independence. What Canada needs? Control of the Northern Corridor. What Canada needs is independence and not being tied to adversarial nations like China and like potentially India, because countries don't remain friendly forever. And if you're reliant on foreign nations for critical infrastructure, critical needs, critical resources, you have a national security threat. What Trump wants for himself is what is best for America and what is ironically best for Canada as well. And that's what's going on there. Now, what the heck was I about to do? I was about to segue into the second sponsor of today's show, but I wanted to remind you to subscribe and turn on notifications before I do that. If you're watching on Hulu or whatever the hell televisions, I don't know how you do it. Go touch the television. Don't touch the television. It leaves fingerprints forever.